Welcome back to the workshop, everybody. So glad you could be with me here today. Walter here at the workbench. Today, we're going to talk about smoothing planes. What they are, why we use them, and what's in a name. So what I have in my hand here is a single blade, or called a single iron, wood body plane that I made. That's all it has is a single piece of iron. It does have a nice tight opening for the mouth, naturally properly sharpened with a little bit of camber on it. And if you don't know what that means, it means that there's a slight arc on either corner of the blade. That's so it doesn't dig in, and it leaves you a nice smooth surface without plane tracks or tear out. So let's start there. This could be a smoothing plane. If the wood behaves and responds well to this plane, you don't need anything fancier. Now, typically, people will call the number 4 or the number 3 a smoothing plane. However, isn't that funny? There is always a however. It's like, I forget which president it was. He was being advised by some economists as to what the country needed. And each and every economist would come up, meet with him in the Oval Office, and tell him, on one hand, if you do this, this will happen. And then on the other hand, if you do that, that will happen. So after all the economists left, he turned to his vice president and said, you know what we need? We need a one-handed economist. It's the same thing in woodworking. If you're, static electricity, if you're out there and you're fairly new, you'll know exactly what I'm saying. You read one book, it says do this. You read another book, it says do that. They're similar, but they're different. So, this is the number 5. It is called a jack plane. Some people say it's called a jack plane because it is the jack of all planes. It can do anything. It can rough out stock, and as you can see here, maybe you can, maybe you can't, it will smooth, and when the blade is properly sharpened and the chip breaker properly set, it is a smoother. Okay? See those beautiful shavings? That's a smoothing cut. Now prove it. Here's a number 4. Set the same way. A little finer. I can advance that. Typically, a number 4 or a number 3 smoother is preferred for that final cut. You see how I'm getting fuzzies both on the left and right? That's because I have a little extra camber on this blade. Because it is a smoothing plane, it is the last plane to touch the wood. I want it not to leave a single possibility of a plane track. So there you go. That's done. Now, one of the reasons for using a shorter plane when smoothing is because you're not always going to be able to go from end to end and get a perfect polished cut all the way through. You're just not going to. Or let's say you have a blemish right here, and you need to get rid of just that blemish because the rest of everything else is fine. You just need to work that. So what you do is you set your plane as fine as you dare. See, there's no cut. Advance slowly until you start getting a cut. The cut may be that thin. But see, you're taking, you're coming in for a landing, and you're taking just a little bit of wood out until that blemish is gone. See that? That's all you took off. The reason for that is you can set your plane to take off 1/1000th of an inch or less in those tiny little shavings, so that area there is not noticeably lower than this area over here. So that's the number 4. I can smooth with a number 5. I can smooth with a number 4. But the plane that gets the least respect is the number 3. The number 3, I keep set a little different. I keep that set, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little bit of concertina, like a crimpling Goldilocks type of a curl. That's because I've got that chip breaker right up tight to the cutting edge. All right, not too tight because otherwise it wouldn't cut. Now on this poplar, I'm getting sort of a stringy cut, but that is smoothing. And that will work really well when you're dealing with curly maple, bird's eye maple, quarter sawn grain, sycamore, oak. But to show you what kind of a cut I'm really getting, this is some basswood. Okay, you see that? The fibers are holding together tighter. The wood is tighter grain than the tulip poplar. Getting the same type of cut, but we're just keeping it all together a little better. So, if you're new to hand planing, this should kind of explain to you what a smoothing plane is and why do we use it. I'm going full length here, but sometimes it doesn't hit. All right, sometimes the wood moves, sometimes you hit a funny grain, but the smoothing plane excels in dealing with small areas. That you need to take a blemish out. You can hardly hear it cutting. See that? It just dealt with that little area. You don't have to plane an entire tabletop over. You're just taking whisper thin cuts. So that's the number 3. And as you can see, the number 4, not much bigger. There's slight variations. And of course, the number 5 is a lot bigger. But finish cuts can be done with just about any plane, from a block plane to the largest jointer you have. It all depends on your wood, and it all depends on how you have your blade sharpened and or set. So I'm going to leave you today where I started with my plane. You see that? That is a beautiful cut. One last thing. When you camber your blade for finishing, for smoothing, don't expect to get shavings the full width of your iron. I like to see cuts that are about half of the width of the iron, because then I know for certain I'm not leaving behind any plane tracks. So I hope you found this helpful, useful, maybe entertaining. If you did, give it the old thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe. But more importantly, head out to your shop. Go make some shavings. Walter out.